Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom or Tom. How's it going?
Tony, I am just looking at the camera right now and recognizing that I'm wearing like a bright white, like light gray shirt and a light gray hat, and I look like Frosty the Snowman. So I may change hats at some point because this with the light is not the most flattering setup. But this is the kind of stuff that I spend a lot of time thinking about and don't just notice after we've already hit record. Tony, how are you? How's your lighting?
Doing well. I love mid-production meetings, like mid-show
Mm-hmm.
production.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people
Mm-hmm.
do this before the
Mm-hmm.
show.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll do it after the show and be like, "Oh, you should have
Mm-hmm.
done this, or we should have done that."
Yeah. All right. Now
But
I
this is
look less like a corpse
there
now
you
in a
go.
Blue Jackets hat, so
All
that's
right, there you
good.
go. Good
The Blue
job. Good
Jackets
job.
also looking less like a corpse these days, so it's pretty,
Well,
working out pretty well for everyone.
for now, if only people could watch them on television.
That's a different show, Tony. we,
Yes.
we don't have time for that.
So, what we are talking about today, Tom, is the middle eight. And this is something that we talk about all year long. And I wanted to go back and look to see how did Ohio State do during the middle eight in 2025. When we're talking about the middle eight, we are, of course, talking about roughly the final 4 minutes of the second quarter and roughly the first 4 minutes of the third quarter, the middle 8 minutes of the game. And Ryan Day talks about it. They want to win them all the time. Tom, this year, and it's really, it starts with winning the toss.
Mm-hmm.
When you win the toss, you get to control basically portions of this, and that's kind of what the numbers bear out. But this year, Tom, the Buckeyes were 11-3 on the toss. So right away,
Mm-hmm.
they won the toss 11 times out of 14 games. And if I tell you their three losses were to Ohio, Minnesota, and Illinois, Minnesota, for some reason, decided to go ahead and kick. Or that's beside the point.
Mm-hmm.
But so, and one of the problems with the show is it's just I'm going to be telling you a bunch of numbers, so I apologize for that. But we'll eventually get to it. The three times that Ohio State like received the kick, and this was not their three losses, but they did lose the toss to Ohio. They did lose the toss to Illinois, and both times both of those teams deferred so that they would get the ball in the third quarter. Those two teams scored 19 of the 29 points that Ohio State allowed in the middle eight this past year. So I'll just give you the total. Ohio State outscored their opponents 96 points to 29 points in the middle eight this year. And as I said, 19 of those points went to Ohio and Illinois, both teams who won the toss and elected to defer. Outside of that, they gave up 7 points to Penn State and 3 points to Indiana, winning the toss both times. And so, Tom, I would say, just as the first thought here, Ohio State's pretty good at winning the toss. Now, sometimes their opponents are just bad at winning the toss. So the toss win defense was even good for Ohio State this year.
Yeah, that's one of those things where, how we talk about fumble luck kind of regressing to the
Mm-hmm.
mean. I have not done a deep study on coin toss defense, but I'm going to guess that is probably one of those stats that is going to regress to the mean and be pretty close to 50% on average most years. It is interesting that, yeah, I think if I'm remembering right, the Penn State game, they scored right before halftime. Wasn't that off of a turnover? Didn't Ohio State turn the ball over right before
I think
half?
so.
And yeah, so Penn State scored a touchdown right before half. Other than that, I mean, the middle eight is one of those things that Ryan Day talks about being a point of emphasis quite a bit. And we talk about it quite a bit because Ryan Day talks about it quite a bit. And you see games swing on it quite a bit. Still, that's pretty staggering. The numbers there are pretty staggering. I wonder how replicable that is because obviously you lose the toss. You didn't lose the toss very often. When you did, Ohio scored a touchdown, and yeah, it was a little bit of a fluky play, but they scored a touchdown right after the half on that play. And then Illinois had Illinois had the ball real close to the goal line right before halftime. Did they score after? They must have scored after the break as
They did.
well, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So, that's one of those things where I don't know that that's something that's going to be real replicable just because there's so much luck that goes into winning the toss. But the strategy, I think the one thing that does underscore is if you win the toss and it is your decision, there is some really sound strategy that goes into deferring that first half decision to the second half, getting the ball in to start the second half, and giving yourself the opportunity to potentially score on back-to-back possessions around halftime.
For me, it's always been a more of a defensive thing in terms to defer and get the ball at the start of the third quarter, because you keep your opponent from being able to do that. Like, automatically, they can't do it. And the upside is that you can. And how often does it happen? It doesn't happen a great deal. I will tell you that in terms of the middle eight, Ohio State was 10-2-2 this season in terms of scoring more than their opponents. They scored the same against both Minnesota and Texas. Nobody scored in the middle eight, so there's your two ties. Their two losses were Illinois outscored them 10-7 in the middle eight, which was Illinois winning that toss. Indiana outscored them 3-0 in the Big Ten championship game. That's Ohio State winning the toss. But outside of that, Ohio State, everywhere else, even the Miami game, they scored 7 points at the with the third quarter there, and held Miami out of there. So they were just down considerably by at the half, 14-0 or whatever. Interesting to me is you're going to get the ball to start the third quarter in this scenario, but Ohio State in this past season scored second quarter touchdowns in the final 4 minutes of the second quarter against Ohio, Washington, Illinois, Penn State, Purdue, which was a touchdown and a field goal, UCLA, touchdown and a field goal, Rutgers, and Michigan. That's 8 games where, regardless of the toss, they were able to make the most of that second quarter. So I think that's indicative of good planning, good execution, because you don't know who's going to end up with the ball, but they were able to go into the half on a high for a lot of these games, which has me wondering, yes, always try to win the middle eight and keep your opponent from scoring back-to-back scores. But you look at this and I'm wondering how effective, or how many games did the middle eight win Ohio State? And I don't know that it won them any games, but the schedule as it was like pretty easy. So I don't know how thin the margins were for most of these games.
Yeah, you weren't really playing very, very close games, 60-minute games for really, other than Texas, Miami, and Indiana. I don't think they really played a 60-minute game anywhere there. The thing that's interesting to me is that this, the post halftime thing where you're just winning the toss every week, that feels like that's going to be a very difficult thing for them to run back this year. I wonder if they're going to be able to run back the end of the first half thing, because that seems like that's maybe a little bit more clock management, and maybe you can, how many of those was it that they had that they kicked the ball off to start the game? Most of those where they scored. So either that's it's going to be this many possessions and it's going to work out that it's about an even number of possessions in the first half, or that's something you can sort of manage the clock to, where you can, in basketball, you try and get the 2-for-1 possessions at the end of the half or the end of a quarter or whatever. I wonder if you can sort of manage the game to that, where if your defense can get off the field, and that was certainly something the Ohio State defense did in a very predictable and very consistent way in 2025, you can kind of manage the clock to that. So that's something that I think could be replicated potentially to some degree in 2026. I'll be interested to see. Obviously, they're going to try to do that because then you sort of gain, at least half the benefit of the middle eight there if you can kind of, score a touchdown, kick a field goal with 6 seconds left in the half or 20 seconds left in the half, whatever it is, and you don't leave the other team enough time to do much of anything. It's something obviously they're going to be trying to do. I'll be interested to see if they're just winning the coin toss 50% of the time, which is obviously what you would expect, if they're able to replicate that kind of production and that kind of win in the final 4 minutes of the first half this year.
I think that is more repeatable than doing something in the third quarter. And looking at this, so Ohio State, the dream of the middle eight is you score at the end of the second quarter and you score again to start the third quarter. They had 3 games with double digit where that sort of, I don't know if that specifically happened, but we'll just say, they scored 14 points against Grambling, which doesn't count, 10 against Purdue, 10 against UCLA. And I don't know that those two, this year that might be applicable to your 2 MAC games or Northwestern and Maryland. I don't know that it applies to the rest of Ohio State's schedule. So they weren't able to double up with this middle eight, but what they guaranteed themselves doing is keeping the opponent from doubling up. And so I still think that alone is the reason why you always defer and take the ball to start the second half, and then you don't have to necessarily worry about it. Now you can still score, give up points in the third quarter in that middle eight. It doesn't necessarily eliminate that, but it's not going to be back-to-back scores. It's not going to be a make it, take it type of thing. But yeah, I just wanted to go through it and look at all those, see how they did. But you make a good point, and I guess maybe I need to go back now and do the last 5 years of winning the toss and all of that to see actually it's not a 50-50. It never evens out. Ohio State's always winning the toss 80% of the time, and then it's how?
Well, it turns out they have sent people to scout in person at other teams' games to find out what the toss is, and by running extremely complicated mathematical calculations, they know that tails never fails. But the other teams don't know that, so that when they have a chance to call, they don't have that advantage. I don't know, Tony, I don't know what other explanation there could be.
Yeah, I don't. Frankly, there is no other explanation. And one of these, Ohio State scored a touchdown to start the third quarter, but it was a 7.5 minute drive that I didn't even count as this, But there's the first 5.5 minutes, I'll count it. 7.5 minutes, it's sure, you're winning, but you haven't scored there yet. But so Ohio State did very, very well in the middle eight. Not well enough when it mattered, I guess, is the key here, because they outscored Miami in the middle eight, didn't lead to a win. They did not outscore Indiana in the middle eight, led to a loss. So I guess do better in the bigger games. And although maybe that right there tells you if you win the middle eight, then you're gonna have a better chance to win a low scoring game. But just because winning the middle eight is great, unless of course you've been shut out in the first half, and then that's also an issue.
Well, it would be interesting to go back over 20 years and figure out, if you win the middle eight, what percentage of the time do you win the game? And is winning the middle eight, is that like Urban Meyer's stat about blocking a punt, and you block a punt, you win 90% of the games? Is there that kind of correlation, or is it? I would assume it's probably lower than that, but yeah, that would be, Tony. I don't want to volunteer you for a whole bunch of long drudgery and toil, but you do seem like just the guy to run this kind of study.
I sure don't. But there you go. I just want to throw some numbers out there. I hope it wasn't too many. And if you're taking notes at home, you should be. And then you can follow along on your notepad like I do. So there you go. If you're watching on YouTube, please go ahead and hit that thumbs up. We'd appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel if you've not yet done so. And, of course, you can continue to find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.